I'm DannyMax. Throughout the years I've made many models and renders, including 4 album covers and 2 simple animation loops for some music videos. I've also made 3 short games and currently I'm working on the 4th one. So, in this video, I want to have a digestible overview of my process when making these renders. With this, you should get a rough idea of what it is that I do. Now, for this example, I will be using my most recent model. Here you can see a time-lapse of me modeling. But before we see that, I have to go over something else. If you look at my renders for even just a few seconds, you will realize that they have a certain look to them. They look kind of outdated, like the early CGI of a 90s to 2000s movie or video game. Well, that's because they do, and intentionally so. I don't know about you, but I love the look of this era of CGI. They have a very ethereal or surreal kind of aesthetic that I can't get enough of. It's just something you can't really get anywhere else. I especially like the way metallic textures look.
Okay, how do you achieve this look?
I'll tell you. For like 90% of the process I use Blender. Big shocker there. And I personally am stuck on Blender 3.6. Don't ask me why that one specifically, it's just the one I'm accustomed to. And I don't feel like upgrading. If you are on Blender 4.0 onwards, some of the things I'm gonna talk about might be slightly different, but I'm pretty sure they should work regardless. If not, then first thing I do is go on the render properties. Turn on ambient occlusion. This makes shadows look better between small cracks and crevices. I usually keep screen space reflections off, because sometimes I don't like the way dark areas are indirectly illuminated by reflections. I will occasionally turn them on if I feel it's a good fit for the render. I guess this comes down to personal preference. And motion blur I only turn on if I'm going to animate something. Then, in shadows, turn both cube and cascade size to their max resolution of 4096 pixels. Then turn off soft shadows. This makes the shadows nice and sharp. After that I go all the way down to color management, change view transform to standard, and change look to either high contrast or medium high contrast. Depends on what I'm going for. Now, in world properties, I change the color to black, or just a very dark color. This is what gives me these harsh, pitch black shadows that I really like. These settings make a pretty significant difference in the way my renders look. It took me a couple of years of experimenting to come to this standard. But, merely changing some settings will not yield the desired results. Let's begin modeling. I will confess that most of the time I don't sketch out a character or make any sort of concept art before I start modeling. Often a design comes to mind and I try my best to create it. Sometimes that works really well and the entire process flows very smoothly. And sometimes I struggle to make anything I like and I get stuck on one part for hours. This was one of those times. As you can see, I was fighting for my life here trying to make an appealing face. For a while I was trying to make this kind of face mask with a wide open mouth. Until I realized, okay, I need to keep this simple, stupid. Finally ending up with this face. After that it was mostly straightforward. Now I start making the body with some simple geometry. Blocking out, you could say. And this is the part where I always feel like a fraud. Seeing the body like this makes my head fill with doubts. I love making these smooth, shiny surfaces, and at this point, it's the complete opposite. Then I give it a surface subdivision modifier and everything's okay again. It's really just a matter of trusting the process. I have to get over my creeping doubts every time and keep persevering. Anyway, after I'm done blocking out the body and I've applied the subdivision modifier, I can start making the smaller details. I'd say this is one of the parts I spend the longest on. I usually like to go all out making a bunch of extrusions, holes, bolts, or other objects sticking out. And sometimes I have to recognize when something isn't working and go ahead and remake certain details or just scrap them entirely. I like making maximalist designs, but I also have to be careful not to overdo it, otherwise it's just an incomprehensible mess. It's a balance. Like I said earlier though, in this case I kept it pretty simple. This model is basically just a bunch of fancy looking cubes, and really you could describe most of my models as fancy cubes, cylinders, and spheres. But it's much more apparent here since I wanted to make a blocky kind of design. Now, I didn't record the entire modeling process because I didn't feel like it. For the most part, I make textures inside Blender with the node editor. They usually don't get too complex unless there's something really specific that I want to do. When I don't make my own textures, I get one from my textures folder, which has a few hundred textures inside. Nearly all of them come from SketchUpTextureClub.com. Did I say that right? I generally dislike the process of looking for textures online, but this website is a true treasure trove. Unfortunately, most of the textures there don't include bump maps or normal maps, unless you pay. And it limits you to 15 downloads per day. On some days, if you snuck up on me, you'd see me trying to tactically choose the best possible textures, knowing that if I wasn't happy with the ones I chose, I'd have to wait 24 hours to get more. But for the kinds of things I do, this website works just fine. Something pretty specific that I do is I get a Musgrave texture set to rich multifractal and plugging it into specular. This makes it so it gets reflected when light interacts with the texture. It's kind of subtle, but I think it adds a lot to the look of my models. Another thing, for these glowy parts I get a gradient texture with a color ramp node and plug it into emission. This is just so they're not a single flat color. Rigging is usually a very straightforward process. Since most of my models are inorganic and rigid, I don't have to worry about weight painting. I don't think anyone likes weight painting. And here's the final rig. Is what I would say if I was lying. If I was to post a model like this, it would be a big pain in my We have to add inverse kinematics. This makes it so that instead of having to rotate each individual bone on the extremities, we just have to move these two bones and the program will take care of the calculations. Before I even begin modeling, I already have a pretty clear idea of how I want the model to be posing, and of how I want to frame the whole thing. Low-angle shots are good for making things look bigger and more imposing. Higher-angled shots allow you to see more of the world. Sometimes I like to do close-ups for a more involved or personal view. When I'm just showcasing a model like this though, I use a pretty neutral angle. And something I do in most of these model showcases is increase the focal length by a significant amount, because I despise having this fisheye look. Basically, increasing the focal length brings forward all the features of the model at the cost of decreasing the field of vision. There are a couple of exceptions, like in this render. I have a pretty low amount of focal length, which combined with the position of the camera, makes it overall a bit more dynamic. You can see his hand looks pretty big in comparison to the rest of his body. While rigging tends to be a kind of tedious process, posing is actually pretty fun for me. After all the modeling and texturing, I finally get to see my character come to life. And also I get to do this. Posing doesn't usually take long, but occasionally I will obsess over slightly different poses. Like in this render, I spent at least 30 minutes debating myself whether or not I should keep his arm up like this, or if it'd be better to have it down by his side. It happens sometimes. Surprisingly, this part has the tendency to be pretty time consuming for me. You'd think I'd just drop a few light objects in there and be done with it, but no. Lighting has such a huge impact in the way a render looks. With it, I control which parts are highlighted and which parts are obscured. It also plays a huge role in establishing the mood. You can make it daytime, nighttime, or anywhere in between. You can use it to create shadows, or you can use it to imply that something out of view is producing light. It can make a scene look more dramatic, or maybe more inviting. point is, lighting is very important. I'm sure you didn't need me to tell you that if you're familiar with this kind of work. Anyway, for this kind of render, I almost always make sure the whole thing is lit up. Since the whole point is to show off the model, I don't want it to be obscured that much. Colors and positions vary a lot, obviously, but it almost always follows a similar structure. One thing I forgot to say is in render properties under film, I turn on transparency so that all the empty space is, well, transparent. And finally, once I render the scene, I take the result and put it into my image editing software, Paint.net, because I refuse to learn Photoshop. Sometimes I change the brightness and contrast slightly, but I didn't feel it was necessary here. So I just made a pretty little background here, added a shadow here, and slapped my name on the corner there. And that's it. This is the final render. And a couple more. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna start working on the next one. Goodbye.